Hi everyone, the house, and we are in the Salalaki neighborhood. I promise I will be taking you to Salalaki again and again. This is David Sarajishvili, in case you forgot what he looked like. And also, again, this recording is going to be in open access for a while, so someone else might just accidentally come across this video, and I want it to be at least a little bit, well, at least helpful to connect some dots. So this is the house. You can see it's gorgeous, European style, and in the entire neighborhood is basically European style because it was already established in the late 19th century when Tbilisi had become the center of the Caucasus, economic center. Well, not really the capital, because the capital was St. Petersburg, right? But it was the big center of the Caucasus. And yeah, it's not just brandy, but it's oil that was transported through Georgia from Azerbaijan. Georgia doesn't have oil, at least not that we know of. No, it hasn't been discovered yet. But well, oil, the railroad construction, and also a lot of financial interests, let's say with the Siemens brothers, for example, who also came to Georgia to build their big telegraph line from London to Calcutta through the Caucasus. So some of the old views, some of the old photographs, you could that's well, the Salalaki mountain range from there. And yeah, so I would say that this house hasn't changed at all. And also it just looks the same. It's amazing that really much restoration has been needed. And there's always life in this house. We're starting here and we're quickly going upstairs. We're taking the same staircase. On the first floor, well, it's now this house kind of combines two organizations. It's the Museum of David Sarajishvili, and it's also still the Writers' House of Georgia, like Writers' Union of Georgia is housed here. And this institution runs a lot of projects throughout Georgia and also, well, international projects. They're making sure the legacy of David Sarajishvili is not forgotten. And even though the brand is still around. I mean, it's back again because for some time there was no brand Sarajishvili in the market, but it's back again. However, it has nothing to do with the Sarajishvili family. Sarajishvili, that's him also never, where he didn't have any children with Ekaterina Porkishvili, his wife, but he considered all those writers that he had been helping his children in a way, and he took very good care of them, very good care of them. And well, the Sarajishvili company right now is also rebuilding, let's say, the legacy of Sarajishvili, which was forgotten, obviously, during the Soviet period. The Sarajishvili's name was totally crossed out from history. You know, Bolsheviks like to change and rewrite history the way they wanted to, omit names, just pretend that some people had never really existed. And yeah, they were very good at it. But now I think there's still a lot of things to do with regards to, just maintaining the legacy of Sarajishvili. And this house does a very good job. In this Moorish room, which was one of the living rooms, well, you could see also the photograph of Ekaterina Porkishvili sitting on the big sofa. Part of the construction is still around, but not entirely. And obviously, yes, it was a European house, but because Sarajishvili studied and spent big part of his life in Europe, he got 2 degrees, as you know. He studied in Germany and he studied in France, the cognac making. And later on, he came to Georgia, and he also hired a lot of French specialists that helped him set things right and help him just get everything started in order to start producing cognac. Well, at that time it was called cognac. Now you can't really say that because cognac is brandy made in in the region, right? But we're saying brandy. And obviously, he invested a lot of his money, and well, it was a very risky business, but he succeeded. As for the interiors, so the Moorish room is simply because it was super trendy. But it's always interesting to see, a lot of these details. Like last time, I told you about these interesting um, Murano glass. I'm not even sure what you call it. Like certain inlay. Well, these elements. Let's say the elements. Several doors on the upper floor, on the second floor, were decorated with these Murano glass elements. And I was there on Friday. I was just passing by, and I decided to well to visit the house again. And I took some photos for you of what it looks like. Every element is the original, and it's unique. It was all made to measure. It was all custom made for David Sarajishvili. It wasn't just a project that was designed for him by Karl Tar, a German architect. It was more than that. It was also very personal because it was the wedding anniversary gift, like 10th anniversary of their wedding. So that's why those hearts are crowning each of these Murano glass elements. Isn't it cute? So I told you there were, well, but I couldn't really show it to you, so now I can. Now I can. Well, you see it here, but I think it looks better just in the doors and the elements. Yeah, so from the other side, you could see the hearts, not from here. The stained glass is original. Everything in this house is original, mainly because these writers' organizations, writers' union that was housed here was very, well, it was very careful with the interiors and tried to preserve everything the way it looked, basically. And I will tell you later on as the tour goes that how it was possible for the writers to stay in this house even under the Bolsheviks. We'll talk about it, but for now, let's just see a bit more of the interesting facts. So last time we did discuss how much Sarajishvili did for the country, but I think we can also see it in actually how much money he actually left in his will for different organizations. So 3 million rubles, that's just a great deal of money. He left for all sorts of educational institutions, as all sorts of research facilities. And he also wanted to boost the level of literacy among the Georgian people. And he did a lot for the preservation of the Georgian language. Obviously, he spoke Russian, and it's done in rubles here because ruble was the official currency in the Russian Empire. So it doesn't matter where you live, Armenia, Georgia, no one cared, right? It was rubles. And however, it's important to say, and by the way, you see also on the screen the photographs of the original will that David Sarajishvili left. He died from an oncological disease, and his wife took over the business. It's interesting to say, however, that as much, well, he was a great patriot, and he did a lot to preserve national identity through language, through history, for nourishing local talents. He was actually in good relationships with the Russian government. And I'm saying it not to please anyone, and I'm saying it not to, well, I don't really have any other agenda here, but just saying that he was respected, and he was appointed as one of the financial counselors, which was a great deal. So all the most successful merchants would would be respected, would well, and would contribute to the economy of the empire. And he was in good relationships with the empire, so he tried to do things diplomatically, and it worked. The same as Ilya Chavchavadze, well, the famous um, patriot of Georgia, writer, poet, who is probably number one and the one of the, let's say, symbol of the liberation movement as well. He also did it diplomatically. I will be taking you to the house of Ilya Chavchavadze. It's a museum in a 19th century house. A lot of a lot of original items there. So yeah. And by the way, what you see here is already the will of Yekaterina Porakishvili, or Porakishvili Sarajishvili. So she also left less, but also a great deal of money to different organizations. You can see that schools, construction of churches, different societies, theaters, uh, concert halls all around the country. And it's so sad that Georgians don't, well, I'm generalizing, obviously, but you have the idea, right? It's so sad that people don't know that. I mean, in general, overall. So we've seen some of the elements of this room. We've seen some of the exhibits, so we're not going to repeat ourselves this much. But I just wanted to give you just also the overview of this room. And this room is not well, the official name is just the room of David Sarajishvili, but I would rather call it a treasury, because some items here on display are literally treasures, not just because they are meaningful, but they're actually very expensive as well. So this is the photo, right, of Ekaterina Porakishvili, and on the opposite wall, some elements of the sofa that have survived. With regards to Ekaterina Porakishvili, so she also had a brother, and basically, when David Sarajishvili passed away, and when she passed away, her brother was nearly Sarajishvili himself had two sisters. They remarried, and they left for Europe after the in the 1920s, because they married to the nobility, like the Eristavi family, and they left. But the relatives of Ekaterina Porakishvili, at least her brother, stayed. But he obviously couldn't, he wouldn't have been able to, I will put it like this, he wouldn't have been able anyway to take care of the house. So it was decided that the house would be sold, and the house was sold to a merchant, Akaki Koshtaria. We don't really know too much about him. Especially, we don't really know much about him before he became the owner of the house. But Akaki Koshtaria was, I would say, a very politicized merchant. So unlike David Sarajishvili, Akaki was very much against monarchy, and he was he was supporting the Georgian liberation movement. And when the empire collapsed, Georgia got its independence for 3 years. So he was very politically active. And that's why when the Bolsheviks, and yes, so then this house remained the hub, of the intellectual life, but also Akaki Kashtaria, well, before Paul Yashvili, let's just talk a little bit more about Akaki Kashtaria. Akaki Kashtaria welcomed in this house not only writers, but also politicians. Well, for some time, this part of this house was rented out to the British embassy. And there was so-called, for several months, there was the so-called British mandate. It's not really a well-known thing, but it was also a British mandate here for a short period of time. There was also a German mandate. um, also for a short period of time because Germany um, was the guarantee for Georgian independence, and also because Germany and Turkey were allies in the First World War. Germany um, made sure that Turkey would not, well, the Ottomans would not invade because they easily could, because Georgia borders on Turkey, and this is the area of the Ajaria region, right, where the Black Sea is. We we've been there together, and so this was the only opportunity for Georgia to make sure that the Ottomans would not invade. But then uh, eventually, when Germany and the Ottoman Empire lost, Britain came, and that was very different time, I would say. So, but anyway, just well, as Bolsheviks were approaching, Akaki Kashtaria knew he would be among the first people to be killed, to be executed, to be punished for all sorts of, um, political involvement of Kashtaria. So he migrated to Europe, to France, and well, this was it. And when the Bolsheviks invaded, it just, on the one hand, it was a miracle. On the other hand, it was a diplomacy. The thing is, so what I'm, well, the person I'm showing you is Paolo Yashvili. Paolo Yashvili was a Georgian poet, symbolist poet. We walked along the street named after Yashvili a couple of weeks ago. That's where we also had our Chacha experience. So that was that tour. A lot of fun. But we started off with the poetry and ended up having a lot of, great vodka. Well, I think that's pretty much how it goes in Georgia anyway. So in Paolo Yashvili um, was actually the one who won this house from the Bolsheviks. He, well, it's only thanks to him that the writers had this house to themselves. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure Beria, Lavrenti Beria, who was the kind of the representative of Stalin in Georgia, and also Sergei Orджоникидзе, who was the People's Commissar, also one of the revolutionaries, one of the Bolsheviks um, that was in charge of the takeover in Georgia. So they would have taken this house for sure because they had a good taste for real estate. But Pauliashvili knew a lot of the Bolsheviks. It's how? Well, because 60% of the Bolsheviks that invaded Georgia in 1921 were Georgians. 60% were Georgians. Sergei Ordzhonikidze was almost was the head of the takeover basically, and Pauliashvili, through the thanks to his connections, he just talked. He just talked to the people, and somehow miraculously, Ordzhonikidze and then Lavrenti Beria, well, they were okay with the writers to stay in the house. Again, this is something completely unusual. These things normally did not happen. And the thing is that usually, well, the Bolsheviks hated capitalists so much that they would normally do things contrary to what those capitalists had ever wanted. And Sarajishvili left the house, Ekaterina Parakishvili left the house to the writers. But somehow, for 1 year, Lavrenti Beria allowed the writers' community to stay in this house. And they were exempt of all the fees except for utility bills. So I've been told by the museum guide that that's the copy of that document. So Lavrenti Beria just almost gave this house, like rented it out to the writers almost free of charge. So no rent, nothing. And it only lasted just for 1 year. Then things started to change, and then they had to be paying for it, but the fee was not really uh, that expensive. But then a lot of these writers had to pay, with their lives as well. So that's barrier, just just in case. And one would think that, well, many writers actually did well, at least at the beginning, they were sure, they were hopeful. I don't know, maybe just hopeful, but mistakenly sure also that since those Bolsheviks, so many of those Bolsheviks were Georgians, they would be merciful to their compatriots. Like Georgian Bolsheviks had to be merciful with Georgian writers. But no, that didn't happen, unfortunately. Or maybe it was, for 1 year, okay, for 1 year, but then things started to change. But we will talk more about it next weekend. The tour is already up, as you can see. Now, there's a lot of China. Well, you've just seen. This was, by the way, Sarajishvili's safe box. This is the copy of his will, together with the list of all the items and all the the all the items that were in the house and the will. And this is the Akaki Kashtaria, so the person who signed also mm, um, the contract when he bought the house from Ekaterina Parakishvili. And there were some other documents there that are sometimes on display, sometimes not. That's Sarajishvili's rocking chair, by the way. And yes, so once again, that's the door. Here on the fireplace, you can see items that it's all sorts of collectibles, all sorts of porcelain and vases and everything. Many of them are from the Soviet period, many of them, but the fireplace is original of early 1900s when the house was built. That's I actually thought, I was absolutely sure that vase was Danish porcelain, but no, that was Soviet, from the Lomonosov porcelain manufacturer. Photograph of Ekaterina Parakishvili. There are not so many photographs of Parakishvili, by the way, which is very sad. But anyway, so I told you last time, I think briefly, that when Sarajishvili passed away, he was buried in a Dudube cemetery, like a Dudube pantheon. It's just, one of the cemeteries. And the entire city, uh, well, just went to the cemetery, followed their procession um, to say goodbye. And that's Rajeshwari standing, I think, next to his house. I'm not sure. Well, standing somewhere. He was always elegantly dressed. He always looked as a European gentleman. And that's also the original table. Everything was designed for Sarajishvili. Yeah, so the entire city followed the procession, followed the coffin, up to the cemetery, to the pantheon. And then the Bolsheviks asked the brother of Ekaterina Parakishvili, who for some reason had stayed in Tbilisi, they asked him to move the coffin of Sarajishvili elsewhere. And, he did. How? Because he didn't really have funds for it, but he remembered that Sarajishvili was buried with a huge diamond ring. And they found the ring, they took it off, and they sold it. And then Sarajishvili was buried in the center of Tbilisi. These are the items that belong to Ekaterina Parakishvili. The small vases, the perfume bottles of all sorts, her dress, by the way. So I asked the guide, they told me it's actually her dress, and that's her, I don't know, I'm not even sure what this is, but something clearly made from porcelain, different items from her bedroom, and that was about a box for a bonnet. Her dress, very stylish, and probably that was the box for that bonnet. I'm not sure. I don't know. This also belonged to Sarajishvili, and here they exhibit the gifts given to him by guests, partners, whatnot. So this is the china, a very rare kind of Chinese porcelain. I honestly don't know, no idea. And also this is just some collectibles from Ekaterina Parakishvili collection. Well, I guess it was a very common hobby at that time. So now these things, well, these are the cartridges for the gunpowder that would be placed on the chest, on the choha, the official, well, the uniform, right? Now choha is also worn for weddings, but back in the days, choha would be worn every day, and there would be just kind of the gala choha, everyday choha, and well, these elements up until well, automated weapons would be produced, right, with bullets. Well, Georgian men would be wearing these cartridges with gunpowder on their chest, but mm, well, when there was no need for gunpowder anymore, and when bullets were used, they remained. So these cartridges remained just the decorative element, and now a lot of Georgian designers incorporate this element on their modern clothing, on their modern designs, and even on women's clothing too. And Georgians like it. So the pocket watch that you can see here to the left is was made by Omega. He bought it in Switzerland. It's gold, it's platinum, and it's worth 4 million lari. That's $1.5 million, and it's definitely Sarajishvili's. And I have no idea how this pocket watch, I mean, survived. I have no idea, and the guide didn't know either. So but it was donated to Sarajishvili Museum. So it must have remained in somebody's collection, and then it must have been just purchased for the museum or just given for the museum. I don't know. I mean, it was given, but I don't know who did what over here. And over hold on a second. I just want you to see this. Even though that's a replica, I think the seal is still nice to see. Yeah, over there. So that's the seal, but it's the copy of the seal of David Sarajishvili over there. Yeah, so as I said, it's this room is a treasury. It's a treasury. Also, Sarajishvili and Ekaterina Parakishvili had a lot of porcelain. We saw some of it last time, and there was a lot more, but there's no space to exhibit this. And here we see all sorts of documents. Well, these are, for example, the documents signed by Ekaterina Parakishvili. Well, because she was in charge of everything, all the deals, all the international agreements. She also arranged the export of the brandy to some regions of Europe. And she was the one who actually, well, he was the first brandy manufacturer that was given a license. That's a big deal. Well, I'm not sure what this is, but well, this photograph was taken in Batumi, so this has something to do with the family of Ekaterina Porakishvili. Well, yeah, so it just says it says a letter to her family. That's what it says. Also, Ekaterina Porakishvili carried on this tradition of dinners, of literary salons. So, for example, the image to the right is the menu um, that, well, this tradition was started with Sarajishvili, and after his death, Ekaterina just continued this tradition, and it felt, well, just almost as it used to be. So her support of the writers, her support of the people of the country just never dwindled. I think this is just absolutely remarkable. I have no idea how she managed to pull it through. I don't know. No idea. So, but, well, she did. And we do not know whether well, the degree, her degree of involvement in the business activity of her husband, well, I mean, he was around, but even if, well, if she was, okay, well, it makes sense that she had already been aware of things, but if not, well, I head off to her anyway. This is, by the way, the photograph of the procession of the burial ceremony of David Sarajishvili, and this is the photograph of the church on the Nevsky Avenue. You may remember the church, the Kashweti Church, right across the street from the parliament. So this church was built, well, the land for the church was purchased by Sarajishvili, and then when during the Soviet period, the Soviet government demanded that the grave had to be moved elsewhere. So the church gladly provided the land for the reburial of Sarajishvili and his wife. So this is the photograph from my camera roll. And also when I was there on Friday, I took some photographs for us. The problem is that I just needed to film something for the next week tours about the writers, and it was so dark in general. I'm gonna have to be using a lot of, Photoshop or editors, because I don't know, it's just a little bit. It's not very convenient. I don't know how to work with that. So the balcony. Well, the balcony is probably my favorite thing in the entire house. I don't know, but I think that the balcony is absolutely exceptional. So, as we just roaming a little bit around the balcony and also a little bit in the garden, um, let's just talk a bit about the 1920s and what the next tour, maybe two tours, are going to look like. So the house now, apart from just being a museum and a research facility, and, well, the kind of a big international research facility. Okay, let's keep it like this. It also has sort of rooms for writers, for let's say researchers, for interpreters or writers to come to Georgia, for, well, I don't know, exchange students, all sorts of these programs. Well, they can stay also in this house short term on the third floor, on the upper floor. That's what I've been told by the guide. I have not been to that area. I mean, haven't been to that section, so it's not really accessible to just to anyone. But the garden is. The garden has a restaurant, and very often, well, I remember, I haven't had a chance to try the food yet. I was just always in a hurry, but also, as far as I understand, there are a lot of talks about literature. There is the restaurant name is Litera, so which means a latter, right? So, and it's all themed around literature anyway. And that's really sweet. The tiles, right? The Villeroy, the identical tiles were only on Titanic, so it's the only design by Villeroy of this kind that has survived. So big deal. Then 1920s. So the writers are allowed to stay. The writers are allowed to create within the walls, and there's also a little bit of financial support. And but other than that, nothing. And for some time, just well, maybe a year or two, there was relatively well, kind of a calm times for the writers, but unfortunately, it wasn't like in the Russian Empire. Well, I mean, sorry, it wasn't, let's say, when the Bolsheviks invaded, when the Bolsheviks took over the government in 1917, after the Civil War came to an end, the, well, things kind of started to settle a little bit. And for relatively 5 or 7 years, yeah, well, up until the, no, like let's say up until 1929, 1928, yeah, 28, it was time, well, let's say relative freedom for creative class. And also there was, but while the business and private property were allowed for a very short period of time, it's called new economic policy. These things were not really here. There were differences. Let's say, unlike in the Russian Empire proper, the Bolsheviks would start seizing private property from people in 1928. So technically, in many ways, it was still easier on people, but not on the writers, because Bolsheviks tried to eliminate anyone who did not support their power. That was the thing. So this is John Oliver Wardrop, who was the ambassador uh, uh, in Georgia. He stayed in this house. This is him on the balcony. His sister was with him, and his sister translated the Knights in the Panther's Skin, and most of the translations that you have of the short Rustaveli poem was actually made by her. After they returned to England, there was a Department of Cartverian Languages established in one of, I think in Oxford, if I'm not mistaken. So it was thanks to Wardrop. And also Georgian literature was heavily promoted by the Wardrop family. So speaking of the writers, so well, the writers here, well, you probably remember the two of them standing on the steps. So the man with the mustache in the center of the stairs is Paul Yashvili, and next to him is his good friend Tizian Tabidze. So both of them, unfortunately, died. Uh, Tizian Tabidze was executed by the Bolsheviks, and Paul Yashvili killed himself shortly after that in this very house. Which came to me as a shock when I learned about it first time. So this house has a lot of secrets. Obviously, we will talk about how things developed, and that was this. Well, at this point, at that point, everyone knew what was coming. Everyone, and how did things develop? Well, very easily. So it was only worth, well, it could take less than one day for the Bolsheviks to accuse, well, to suspect, and then accuse, and then sentence anyone, uh, well, in connection, let's say, with like governmental activity, anti-Bolshevik activity. It was, and then everyone just had to denounce on each other. And this is how many people, and this is what many people did. But Paul Yashvili could not. He just could not denounce on his friend, on his closest friend. So on July 22, 1937, Palishvili committed a suicide in this very place during the session of the Writers' Union. So exactly at the time when this session was still on, Palishvili left the room and shot himself from the gun that he had been left shortly before that. And these are the effigies of the animals. This is from the Soviet period. I don't know what they're doing here. Well, this just remained from the Soviet period. I guess this, I don't know, Bolsheviks liked it. I don't know. And there is something else I wanted to share with you. We still have the time. This is a little bonus, but I think, well, actually, I am excited about it. You may remember last year. Well, oh, by the way, this is the one of the factories, brandy factories that belong to Sarajishvili. But you may remember that about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that, I took you to the wine factory #1 in Tbilisi, which is now a big gastro hub. This is the photo of the area like 100 years ago. I'm not sure exactly which year this is. I don't think it's actually dated, or maybe it is, but I can't remember now. So everything around this wine factory is it looks very different, but the building of the factory is still there, and some other buildings next to it as well. And you will see it. Like, it really hasn't been changed. So this building was constructed at the very end of the 19th century, and there is still a question to what degree Sarajishvili participated in it, but he definitely supported the construction financially. We can't say that this wine factory belonged to Sarajishvili, but it looks like, because the brandy, brandy still needs some wine products. It's just how brandy is made. So obviously, Sarajishvili had a lot of different facilities, because he also produced different kinds of brandy, and then he also had to distribute it. So it wasn't just like one facility, he had several. He also had a lot of cellars, he had a lot of storage rooms rented and also purchased for him. And he also needed sort of some wine products. So it's highly likely that Sarajishvili financially participated in this project, didn't own it, 100%, but some extent, in order to be able to use some wine products for his brandy. We're still not sure what exactly, what the interest of Sarajishvili, but we can assume that. So these big wooden barrels, you probably remember from one of my live walks, they're really huge, and it's only just 19th century technology. So we were there yesterday with Grisha, so I took some more photos. And as you enter the building, that's what it looks. So it's like also one big wine cellar. Yeah, a lot of queries, but the query, it's the old Georgian tradition of winemaking. It's just as old as 8,000 years. You know that already. But the bottling and also the wooden barrels, this is the thing of the 19th century only. And there is now a big wine bar in the heart of the room. There is this big wine press over here, this one. It's used as just like a table, just like bar counter. And Grisha was really impressed with this. This is just some of the things like used for distillery process. Grisha's very suspicious that actually that this is a wine press, but it was like the old kind of wine press, usually just cut out from the one trunk of a tree. But anyway, but apart from just a wine bar to the left, to the right, to the right, to the left, and now to the right, there is also a big storage. And this is the Enoteque, like wine storage of Georgia, and it's one of the well, it's one of the biggest wine collections in the region. Well, it's definitely the biggest in the Caucasus, and one of the biggest in, let's say, in even in Europe. It's pretty big. I was just about to say in the Middle East, but Middle East doesn't really bother this much about wine, so probably wouldn't be right to say. And you see that those bottles are all dusty, really old, and that area looks just like from a scary movie. That's because that's for a long time, this, I mean, it was sealed. It's just preserved there. But recently, honestly, like just about a week ago, the news um, came out that the government of Georgia has just started the campaign on studying of this Enothek of Georgia, right? National Enothek of Georgia. And you see also the different dates, the different, the information about the bottles. So they need to study this collection. So what we know that these are the collections of the of the aristocratic dynasties of Georgia. Also, it's highly likely that some of the, or well, we know for sure that Stalin's wine collection is also part of this Enoteca, and also some wine of David Sarajishvili, and maybe I mean, it's only a legend, so they need to check it. So once we have information, I will be able to share it with you. But it's also, they claim that even some wine of Napoleon uh, could be stored in this collection. How? Because when Napoleon invaded Moscow and the areas around Moscow, well, he didn't have a big wine collection with him, but some some wine was definitely here. Well, there in Moscow, and it was left when Napoleon was pushed away from Moscow. The wine stayed, and yes, unfortunately, after Bolsheviks invaded, lots of the wine was destroyed, but a lot is still there. So there was a big event, the prime minister Irakli Kobakidze, prime minister of Georgia, was present. There was a big event for press, so these bottles were, well, the access was granted, and the chosen people could see those bottles close up, took photographs. These are not my photos, it's just from the internet. And there's a lot more underground. There's a lot more if you go, because they're like about 180,000 bottles, up to 200,000 bottles that are stored, and they need to be studied. And then some of the most precious exhibits will be put up for sale. And you know what the government of Georgia wants to do with the money? They want to establish big wine research facility and educational facility, which I think is a good initiative. And again, we know that David Sarajishvili, well, he must have had something to do with it. So technically, again, Sarajishvili is still helping Georgia. I mean, he's dead for more than 100 years, and yet he's still helping Georgia. He's still sponsoring Georgia even. So I believe it's just an amazing thing. Okay, so I know that it's time to go. So Misha's definitely going to be a couple minutes late, but it's okay. Well, next week I won't have to be, scheduling things in such a way. But this week I had to do this because I didn't want to overlap with any other guide as well, and Misha couldn't do it earlier. Let me know if you have any questions. The chat is open. And thank you so much for your interest in Georgian history, in the legacy of David Sarajishvili. And this is like a really complex thing. Yes, Dolly, Misha is ready, and we will be joining like in a minute or so. So next time, I'm sharing the links again. It will be to talk about Georgian writers and poets. We'll talk about the 1920s, which was still a period of relative calm compared to the 30s. I mean it. We'll be talking about some of the Georgian writers. We'll be talking about some of the some of the literary works that they left that, well, they still were able to produce before being heavily oppressed and repressed. Okay, so let me share the links once again before I switch to another tour. My phone has been so slow. Once again, what is going on? Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll see you in a couple of minutes together with Misha. I don't know. I don't think that the wine is going to be any good. I think it's vinegar. I think it's vinegar, and it smells like vinegar, to be honest, in that place. I think it's just simply, the history, the importance, the heritage. I think that's what people are going to be paying for. I don't know. That would be a perfect location for a horror movie. Absolutely, yes. And I also feel like I have this mission of, spreading the word about Georgia, promoting Georgia is such an amazing region, and also Sarajishvili, who had done so much for his country and his people. So I absolutely had to do this. Thank you so much, everyone, for your interest, for your um, love of Georgia, and I'll see you together with Misha on a completely different tour about, well, Bulgakov's literary works. Bye bye.